Good afternoon, everyone. What a thrill it is to be at Harvard. Part of my position at with Winsight Media is I'm publisher of Foodservice Director magazine. So I've worked on Restaurant Business magazine, our sister publication, for a number of years. But the last 14 years I've been dedicated to non-commercial food service. So what a thrill it is to finally be here at Harvard, to see everything we've been writing about all these years. So thank you, Krista. It's been fantastic. Something I shared with the group is how touched I am to be here. I come from a long line of Scottish, Presbyterian, dairy, corn, and soybean farmers from northern Illinois. My great-grandfather came over in 1867 as a blacksmith from Glasgow, Scotland. My great-grandfather started it. My great-grandfather kept it going. My grandfather kept it going. And oh, by the way, my dad said, no more. I can't do the farming anymore. So I understand what Janae was talking about and everything you guys do on the agricultural side. The farm to me was a place to visit Grandma and Grandpa when I was a kid. It was a summer escape from Mom and Dad. I got to go play on the farm. So what a thrill it is to be here. I'd like to start out with a couple of fun facts. Our panel has been introduced. As I do talks, I like to give a little warm-up session. So, okay. He talked about food service. Has anybody seen the Netflix series 7 Days? If you get a chance, go on Netflix, see 7 Days. We were talking about that. It's fascinating. One of them was the Westminster Dog Festival, Kennel Festival. One of them was the 7 days leading up to the opening of 11 Madison Park. Wow. You want to get an appreciation of what happens in food service, watch those programs. I get to be an observer from the outside. So with that, the food service industry, what is it? What does it represent? Bottom line, we are food consumed away from home. That's what we do over on this side of the business. 50%, 50 cents of every food dollar is consumed away from home. Think about that. It's the first time in the industry they've ever been 50-50, retail, grocery, and now food service. So it has changed our lifestyle. We're all familiar with baby boomers and how we're talking about millennials now, right? But all the baby boomers over the years, and I'm sure everybody got tired of talking about baby boomers, but they changed the restaurant industry over the last 50 years. Pay attention now to senior dining and senior living. They are changing that model as well. So I'll divert and get back to my panel here. The food service industry is over $905 billion. Yes, over $900 billion. There's 1.4 million places in the United States you can get something to eat away from home. 1.4 million. Just do the math, divide that by 50 states. I know there's not as many in South Dakota or North Dakota or Idaho, but anyway. So with that, it's a huge business. There's over 22 segments within food service, according to our sister company, Technomic. It's a huge business. There's 22 different styles of places where you can go dine and eat, of which Shake Shack and McDonald's and Northeastern University and all the places that Dave has been involved with over the years. It's a fascinating industry. So with that, let's get started on what we're talking about here and what food service really is. So Dan, I'd like to start with you as in the background on give us some context. We're all familiar with your brand, the brand you were formerly involved with. 80 gazillion hamburgers served.
We sold a lot of hamburgers.
Rumor has it that's actually translates to 75 hamburgers a second is sold by McDonald's. Yes, so can you tell us the impact and the volume of what McDonald's alone represents?
Well, McDonald's is 14,000 restaurants just in the U.S., and it's probably changing, so give or take. It's been out about a year and a half, so they've probably built a few more. They serve 27 million people a day. And I came prepared with your questions. So what does that mean? So let's just do the math a little bit on that. 2012, something I was involved in was adding apples into every Happy Meal. Gratis, not charging more and shifting that out. And that's a whole nother panel to figure out how we did and all the conversations that went through there. But so 14,000 restaurants, 52 weeks a year. Let's say we serve 250 Happy Meals a week. That's a very conservative number, as you can imagine. Kids love McDonald's. Right. But just that, you're serving 182 million Happy Meals in a year. And that means, so after 2012, kids had access to fresh produce in the Happy Meal. So that was a big thing for us. Another example would be, say, oatmeal. Oatmeal is about, let's say, 50 a week. That's another conservative number. That would be about 36 million. servings, and that's two grain, two servings of whole grain in the oatmeal. So it can be a big impact, and that can be a double-edged sword, right? You've got shakes too, that you're selling a lot of shakes. Well, we also have salads and other things too. So we always went with finding the balance on the menu, not necessarily agnostic to a certain extent of it. Really wanted to have good flavor, wanted to have things that sold. We're a for-profit business, so that was important to us.
Got it. So with your title, Vice President of Culinary Innovation, McDonald's, how did you think about small changes like the oatmeal with adding blueberries? The ramifications that would do to the supply system, did that go into your thought process and on the whole supply side? How are you going to meet all those blueberry needs?
It absolutely did, and there were far smarter people than myself in supply chain working through a lot of those logistics of securing land, securing seed, all of these things that have to be thought through. But the one thing that was always told to me, and I believed it from our supply chain team, was, look, Chef, you can do anything. It's just going to be time and money, and we just have to figure out how that works. And really what it comes down to is if something is the right idea for the consumer, for the guest, I always called them the guest. I hated consumer because we're a restaurant.
Right.
If it was right for the guest, then we would figure out a way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Maureen, Northeastern University, probably not the same scale that McDonald's has, but you have tremendous volumes that Chef Arlene talked about earlier with the number of guests you serve on a daily basis. Chef Arlene shared with us the numbers that Harvard goes through here. Can you put some more meat on the bone, so to speak, and share with us more about the college market and what you guys experience?
Sure, thank you. A little bit smaller than McDonald's. We serve, like Harvard, we serve about 20,000 people a day. We have 31 locations on campus. So when Bill and I were talking, we have catering, we have faculty club, we have retail dining, we have residential dining, we have concessions. We kind of have a little bit of everything. It's just like almost a city's worth of food service, about 73 acres. So 31 locations on that space is quite compact. And we have about 650 staff. The dining program at Northeastern is contracted. So we have Chartwell's as our primary contractor, and Compass Group is the parent company, and we have probably 9 other contractors that I deal with. So I work for the university and oversee all the contracts.
Wow. So I was talking about 22 different segments in the whole food service industry. How many would you represent on a college campus? Would you say 31 locations? So,
probably half of the different segments on campus.
Wow. So as you think about changes and additions to your menu, deletions, food supply, can you give us an example of some things that you've had to think about and contemplate?
Also, to build on Chef Arlene's talk,
Right.
we, like Harvard and Boston College, who are both here today, are members of the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative, which is co-led by the Culinary Institute of America and Stanford University. And that collaboration is meant to amplify the Menus of Change principles, which she also mentioned, that are developed by the Harvard School of Public Health and the Culinary Institute. And there are 24 different principles to create healthy, sustainable, and delicious menus. So we started out by sort of saying, what little changes can we make based on these principles? Because 24, and at first to the team, that was pretty overwhelming. They thought, oh gosh, where do we start? Too many, and so Harvard, actually, the research that they did on the salt was one of the locations that we changed. So we went in and changed all of the salt that we were using to kosher salt, and that immediately reduced sodium on campus by 25%, which is a very easy thing to change, and yet it was big impact for sure. Small change, big impact for sure. And then another thing we did is we worked with some student groups and also with Coke, who's our primary beverage provider. And we rearranged some of the beverage things. We reduced sugary beverages by 10% on campus. And then produce, we really focused on amplifying produce and whole grains and increased both of those 20%. So collectively, just on campus, that's big. And a lot of the MCURC schools are doing the same thing. So that collective impact is small changes at each institution, but big impact.
Yeah, as we multiply it, tremendous impact, right? So with the theme being small change, big impact, Jeff is here from Shake Shack. Your chain is a relatively new one. You described it as a small company with a big brand. So as Shake Shack grows and goes beyond the shores of the United States, you go international, what are some things that you're doing to make positive changes and positive impact on whether it's the planet or customers or guests, let's say?
Yeah, everybody coming in are guests to us, and I've been fortunate where I've been part of our group since we've had one location. So, being able to build the company from one shack to I think we're at 215 globally right now. That all those decisions that we've made along the ways, and having fine dining roots based back to Union Square Hospitality Group and the Green Market of Union Square, those have just lived within our DNA of how we build and how we look at our menus and our restaurants design and how we connect with the community. So while we are growing and becoming more of a national and a global chain with a much bigger brands than the actual number of locations we have, having that as part of our core DNA has really helped us in those small changes. And I think the big impact that comes from it is a whole segment in industry. The fast casual segment has built up around us and with us, and together, we've created this part of those. How many categories? 22 categories.
22 different segments.
When did you start tracking fast casual?
You might just make it 23, but no, we went from 21 to 22, so within the last 10 years.
So by us, being that small one shack in Madison Square Park to today, and there's a new segment, I think that's like a big change.
Right.
You have a lot of groups out there that are, whether they're burgers or they're pizza or they're salad concepts. It's not just us that's doing it. It's that whole segment that's starting to do it.
Sure. So as you've talked about things that you're doing and adding, what are some of the things you've had to change or omit from what you used to do in the past that are also making more of an impact? Has there been any examples you can share in that?
Yeah, as we've grown, it's funny because we started and we created a menu, and nobody really understood what we created. We just created a really delicious burger. And then you start digging into what is it that we created, and what about it do we love? And from the very first Shack burger that was sold wasn't a never ever no antibiotic ever, no hormone ever beef. We made that change early on. We're still at one location. We made that change early on and have lived with it, and have made sure that anywhere we open globally, we're adhering to the same standards. Years ago, we made our potato bun non-GMO, and that particular manufacturer was a retail product. It wasn't a food service product, so their whole line became non-GMO. So if you went into the supermarket, is now not a non-GMO bun, where beforehand, and it was actually prompted by us going international and needing to meet some international regulations so we could export from the U.S. to these countries that had non-GMO regulations. So that one request got that, what is a fairly good size bread manufacturer to change their entire line of bread manufacturing.
Wow. Well, Maureen or Dan, do you guys have examples of things you altered over the years or omitted to make improvements from how you used to do things?
Sure. So I would say in 2004, we had a very well publicized food turnaround or food journey. Our president at the time, Mike Andrus, was there, and what prompted that, and I don't think this is probably going to be surprising to folks, is that people had lost trust in McDonald's food throughout the years. And so what was very important for us to do is to regain that trust. But then also, I think people were looking at processed food or big food or industrial food as the negative. So you wouldn't necessarily be able to put your finger on what our guest didn't like or didn't want. It was just that I believe your food is not real, even though it is. It's not. It's full of preservatives. It's full of additives. Can you tell us what those additives? They might not necessarily know what those additives are, but that was the prevailing research. So when that happens, you have to then take a serious look in the mirror. And so we started making some very real changes. The antibiotic. No antibiotics important to human medicine was one of those big changes. We reinvented the chicken McNugget, taking out the phosphates, taking out the preservatives, the artificial preservatives and flavors and colors, and And that was very important. So going forward, making sure that you're doing that, but also making sure that you're not degrading what people come to love at McDonald's. I mean, I grew up with McDonald's, so I mean, there's things that people are very very passionate about keeping. So we don't want you, McDonald's, to be a health food restaurant. We want you, McDonald's, to be a better McDonald's. Do what you do better. So that really helped guide a lot of our thinking. The fresh beef, all of that. You know, going back to butter for the Egg McMuffin. Liquid margarine. It had its place, I guess, but the Egg McMuffin started out with butter, and that's what people loved. And along the way, very smart people and conscientious people made changes along the way. Well, sometimes you have to relook at that and reverse that. And the way I used to tell the team is that, change now is not an indictment of somebody's decision in the past. It's just people have changed. Our guests have changed, so we have to change as well.
So Julia Child was right. Get back to butter.
Butter, baby.
Get back to butter.
Everybody wins then.
Right. Maureen, how are some options that you've took?
When you say omit, I think a lot of our students are very focused on food waste, which I know you're going to get to eventually. But we recently took away trays, which a lot of universities had done that much earlier, but it was a big debate on campus for a long time. And so 2 years ago, we took away the trays from the dining halls, which has been wonderful. And since then, the students have been kind of, we removed straws, and then now they've removed plastic bags before it became something in Boston a couple of years ago, which reduced 200,000 bags at one location. And at the end of this semester, they're going to take out the single-use 2-ounce like souffle cups. And just the students, so there's a lot of omitting of packaging, I think. And the students are becoming hyper-aware of the packaging around the things on campus, which is really, that's sort of a newer thing, I would say, about the omitting side.
On the omitting side, sure. Yeah. Got it. Dave, you've blessed us, and you're the only supplier on the stage. So, love to get your perspective as a supplier. Even though I know you are a master chef, put your supplier hat on and tell us about some things that you've done as a supplier that have brought big benefits to your business as well as to your customers.
Great question. So I'm relatively new in a current position as a manufacturer. In my previous position, we had a brand, and we had over 500 non-GMO and organic products that we produced under our labels, which was, I believe, the most non-GMO verified products in the country.
Right.
As I go into the new manufacturing role in a new company with a very passionate owner and board about what could we do with the integrity of product, so we looked at our product in 3 basic categories. We looked at our organic product, we looked at our ingredients, we looked at our non-GMO verified ingredients, and then we looked at our conventional ingredients. And conventional is the big bucket, and it really makes you stop and think, well, what is the definition of a conventional product, and why do we lump everything into conventional? So one of the questions we recently had was on flour. You could imagine in a pasta company, flour is a big item.
Sure.
And we look at the glyphosate in the flour, and we say, well, what can we really do about glyphosate? So we're part of an international pasta organization, and we learn about flour that comes from Europe that is literally glyphosate-free, 0 parts per million. And can we import that flour? Is it feasible? Is it affordable? Right. Is it something that we can reflect as a value on our label? Or forget about the financial value. Is it something we can do to make a statement to start to improve the perception that you can have glyphosate-free flour in the United States in a largely manufactured product? So that's one of the things we're working on. And we're probably looking at it more for the strategic value as opposed to the tactical value, that long-term impact of trying to get something back that we haven't seen in the country for some time.
Got it. So is there a willingness from your customers and/or guests to pay more? Are you getting a pat on the back for that? Are you being recognized?
Well, that in its component is in an earlier stage. However, my experience with organic and non-GMO in my previous company was people were willing to pay up to a point. Certainly in retail, where it's more visible and the product says organic and the product says non-GMO, there's a direct value that some people with a certain price point are willing to spend their money on. In food service, yes, as well, but it's harder to detect. And an example would be that we produced, in my last company, we produced an organic mustard, relish, and ketchup packet. Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense if it goes on a conventional hot dog, right? And so if you, if the thought was, we'll put that in the customer's hand because they could see our brand, they could see our name, they could see what it is. But in food service, oftentimes products are so cross-utilized, and it's different from the back of the house to the front of the house, that it's harder. Well, certain companies like upscale law firms and contract feeding and so on, they will definitely want to pay to have the entire outfit with organic, non-GM, and top quality. And a funny thing in education is a lot of the students are very passionate about what they eat, how they eat it, what the ingredients are, and let's get the right thing. A few years in, once they go into a certain set of the industry, that desire, that call for that same product is diminished. And so while I understand it in the higher education as a very important part, there is a dip when you go into the rest of the industry. But it is growing, and it's hard to argue with the success of companies like Costco, who carry the most organic and non-GMO product in the country, sell that most product in the country. So there is definitely a demand, but the 20% delta from organic to conventional sometimes for the average consumer is a difficult bite to swallow.
Sure, sure. Any other examples from our other panelists on examples you've done and a willingness or lack of enthusiasm of your guests to pay more by making those positive changes for the environment and themselves?
It is a really hard balancing act, because a lot of the guests that come into our restaurant, they know exactly how much money they have in their pocket at that moment and what they're willing to spend. The hard case for us is I shouldn't say hard case, the challenge is you also have a group of about 2,000 individual CEOs, the owner-operator community, that also have a vote. So you've got a lot of multiple customers. Sure. Where it really works well is if you can make a change. So I'll give an example like butter, going from liquid margarine to butter. It was not cheaper, it was not easier, and we also had to make the business case. So in all of our testing, we had to show an increase, a lift in that whole line, and then hopefully there's a lift in the breakfast line as well. Well, we saw that. So, it's not necessarily the guest is going to pay more for it. Hopefully the sales will kind of help take care of itself so we don't have to go to the menu board. But then you've got your owner-operators. They have their own ability to go to the menu board, and that's their prerogative. But I would say that it is absolutely early on when you're developing your brief, or what are we trying to solve for, that selling price has to be designated right up front, as well as what margin are you willing to live with. So that has to be, so we all agree going into it that we know what success looks like coming out of it. So.
Got it. Got it.
First of all, I want to be taking notes while I stand, while I'm up here. We're not perfect across our entire menu, but we are always looking at how do we chip away at making changes and improvements. One that we're in the midst of right now is we're changing from the standard Heinz to the Simply Heinz, which removes high fructose corn syrup and replaces with sugar. We're in a fortunate position that we're a growing brand, so we can make changes and kind of counteract it with volume commitments and volume growth versus a mature brand where they have all the volume and they don't have that leverage, where we've kind of had that leverage over the last few years of we have this kind of double-digit growth year after year, and we want to make this change, and how do we just make that increase go away based on the growth that we have. And then, so that's been a benefit to us. And then just looking at being smart with the menu and deciding where can we get the most impact for the changes that we want to make. There's several items that we have in the pipeline right now that we're looking at to make these changes that will cost us a little more, and we'll get a little bit of maybe recognition for it, but it's just the right thing for us to do to go along with our Stand for Something Good mission of just sourcing the best ingredients we can and making those changes where we can at times that we can, so we can incorporate that into our overall food ingredient deck.
Sure. As a supplier, Dave, when you think about new products and doing better for you products, let's just call it that, how does that process start? How do you go about creating those ideas? Is it in the company's DNA, or how does that all come about, or do customers share?
Well, it comes from numerous areas. And when a customer comes forward with a request, one of the things I hear these days, which I'm a little impressed with, is that they'll say, if a customer is looking for a new product for us to develop, say under their private label, they may say, well, we follow the do not use list of products from Whole Foods or from Earth Fare. And while someone could look at the list and say whether they like it or not, the fact is, these companies have set a standard for certain ingredients and sub-ingredients that they allow in their stores. And by the fact that other companies are saying, well, we follow the Whole Foods lists, it certainly shows that Whole Foods was a leader in developing and publishing a list that other people just happen to start to use. So a lot of times when we do get requests from customers, they say, well, we want this, but we want you to follow this ingredient standard, which we like to do. The internal or the creative ideas really have to come from the top of the organization, as maybe they're not going to come up with the exact idea, but to really have someone at the top of the company who says, I want innovation, I encourage innovation, I reward innovation, and I want to hear about innovation. If you have someone at the top of the organization who's constantly providing that environment for people to come forward to create new items, there's a lot more participation, there's a lot more interest, there's a lot more recognition. And so I think that in our company, I'm very fortunate that we have a senior team who's dedicated to innovation, and we see it, we measure it, and we track it. One more small point, just in preparation for this time, this presentation today, the thought that you have to put into, well, what am I doing about innovation? What am I doing about better quality products? It's opportunities like this which make you stop and form your thoughts about what you're actually doing, maybe as a second nature, but you're stopping and thinking and saying. And so once again, in your organization, you have to have a weekly or bi-weekly or monthly meeting dedicated to innovation with a to-do list, else quite frankly, it's the easiest thing to get pushed to the back burner because you're worried about daily production, you're worried about issues and hiring and firing and doing whatever you're going to do. But when you have innovation on the calendar and you have to sit down and you have to explain to people who came up with ideas and why, or what the competition is doing, or something you saw at a show that you think would be new and innovative to the company. So it comes from all over, but you have to have a central group who prioritize it and rank it, and then decide as a company which one of those opportunities you're going to pursue.
Got it. Maureen, how about a college? How does it happen with a vocal 18 to 22-year-olds in the world?
It's a lot of fun. We have, it's a lot, it really is. It actually is a lot of fun. So the students, for about the past 15 years, I've been meeting with the students at 7 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, once a month, which I'm always stunned that they're all there at 7 o'clock. And it's called the Food Advisory Board, otherwise known as FAB on campus. And we talk about what they like, what they don't like. We bring in products for them to sample. It's been as far as like the student voice, and they are students, it's open to all students, but it tends to be students that are hyper involved, student government, resident student association, HEAT, which is our sustainability group, but it can be any students. And the feedback we've gotten from them has been fantastic. We talk to them like we're co-creating the program together. It's not really us pushing to them or them. It's really we're talking about it together and trying to figure out what they like, using our expertise and all the different contractors that we use, and trying to really sort of get their voice into the dining hall. And they love when they come and they ask for something, and they come in, they see it, and they're like, oh, we just talked about that. Yeah, there it is.
There it is.
Or if we can't do it, we explain face to face, here's why we can't do that. They go, oh, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. So, and some things take years that we talk about for a long time, and some things can happen the next day.
Got it. Let's shift gears now and talk about eating on the run, grab and go. The growth of delivery. Statistics are showing that a lot of restaurant sales would be flat if it weren't for delivery. That's keeping a lot of restaurants afloat or keeping their dollar volume up. How is Shake Shack dealing with delivery, grab and go, and in that movement of convenience.
Yeah, delivery has certainly become a large part of our business. It started a few years ago, and it kind of happened to you, and then you have to understand, like, this is happening. You have to be a part of it. Like, you can't just ignore it. And the way that our guests want to consume us and want to interact with us is changing. There was a time where they wanted to stand online at Madison Square Park for an hour. They'll do that on a beautiful spring day and have a beer online. But there's a lot of times now where they want their food delivered to their office, to their home, to wherever they are, and we want to meet them in those places. So it's a heavy area of focus for us, looking at our menu innovation, and now you have to add in that extra layer of how is our food going to travel 20, 30 minutes. We're a cook-to-order restaurant, and we've always been that way. We've never made food and had it sit in a window and wait to sell it. It's always been cook-to-order, and we're always takeout. People always came to us and took food away, and we just figured they're going, to the park across the street or to their apartment, down the block. But now, the food's traveling 20, 30 minutes to a place unknown to us. And that's starting to factor into how we develop and certainly how we present our food and preserve the integrity of our food. So, there's been a lot of focus around delivery, even app order, and how people are wanting to maybe not have somebody deliver it to them, but place their order ahead of time, pick up, and go wherever they want to go with it.
Yeah. Waste. We've heard a lot about waste. It's quite the movement. It's all over. How do you think about waste? How did that come into your conversations at McDonald's as you guys were moving forward on projects or looking for better efficiencies?
Waste is a difficult one, and it was always on everybody's mind, the owner-operator's mind, and we were not necessarily in a cook-to-serve model then. With the fresh beef program, it is a cook-to-serve. You order, we put the burger on, and your burger's coming to you. So there's zero waste there, and it's a tough one. And I don't think they've solved it. I don't think we have a solve for it. And I'm very intrigued by some of the conversations we've had there today. That maybe the environment is changing, because I would say that I was in the same camp. I mean, we had a lot of in our test kitchen, we had food that, it's going out of code, but we are not allowed to necessarily give it to anybody. I don't know where that rule came from, but that's what I was always told.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, so all right, well, then we got to figure this out. So I think education is going to be a big thing for waste in general, for myself, and then also within our industry. But waste is something that is. I would say in the restaurant, when you are having to have a hold button and it needs to be discarded, it doesn't make anybody happy. It doesn't make the crew happy. They look at this food and they say, "What is wrong with this? There's nothing wrong with this food." So it's a tough one, and nobody really wins. So if you're throwing it out, the bottom line is being hurt by the owner operators. If you double hold it and serve it to the guests, and the guest experience is not very good, it's right. Kind of it's a tough situation.
Sure.
That's why I think cook to serve, that solves a lot of issues.
Sure.
Solves a lot of issues.
Right. As we think about, you just touched on it, Dan, with the staff, things that they didn't like. How do you implement change? Maureen, you shared with me change is a constant at Northeastern. How do you get staff and how do you get buy-in to we're changing again? I mean, how do you do it?
That feels
How do you do it?
That actually feels like a daily part of my job. I think because I work for the university and everyone I deal with is a contractor, so I'm always trying to that mission alignment, come with me, we're going to make a change, we're heading in the student direction, we're heading in the university direction. So that's honestly been a part of my job every single day. And the university, Northeastern, has changed a lot in the past 15 years. It used to be a commuter school, and now it's sort of like, feels like we're a part of a startup. I haven't been part of a startup, but I imagine it feels something like this. But it's just like this, trajectory that's going straight up. So the institution's changing a lot. Dining is, of course, changing a lot. And I actually like change a lot. So the people that work with me are like, oh, God.
Right.
But I found that it's best to involve the team, whichever contractor I'm dealing with, right at the beginning. Get them to buy in, get them to be part of whatever we're trying to propose. Like when we did menus of change, that's a perfect example. They said, oh no, 24 principals can't do it, can't happen. I was like, gonna happen, we're gonna do it. Let's work with this. So we just did a little gap analysis of here are the principles, here's where we are. And I said, I think we're further along than you think. And they kind of went through and did it themselves. They said, yes, we are, look at that. I said, look at that. So we said, all right, which two would you like to start with? Okay, two, we can start with two. Start with these two. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, this is doable. And then they were part of it and they got to choose, and then they were, could celebrate on the other side. Look at that, we reduced sodium. We we increased, we reduced sugary beverages, we increased. They could see the evidence of their work and their buy-in. So I think that's been really helpful.
So sales is a gift you have.
Yes.
So we're all in sales.
Yes.
So we talk about selling staff. How do you sell up? The changes you want to make. What's involved in selling up? We all have to report to higher ups. And things, the changes you want to make, how do you get that done? I'll leave that open to all four of you. How do you think about that?
Water on a rock is something that I learned early on. And if it's something that you're really truly passionate about and you believe that it's the right thing to do, then you have to be persistent. You have to kind of live and breathe that. But I would say what gets everybody's ears perked up for a profit company is, what's the business case? Are we going to get more guests coming in through the restaurant? Sometimes the alternative is becoming irrelevant. What do you guys want to do? Do we stay relevant or do we look there? So I would say the biggest thing you can do is be smart business people. Listen to the team. Listen to all of the concerns of everybody, the operations team, the marketing team, the communications team. All right, let's all figure this out together. Does the business case work? If the business case works, the owner-operators are going to jump on board. Steve Easterbrook, the CEO, is going to jump on board if he's making money. So everybody's going to win if you go through that due diligence. Sure.
There's a group up here before that was talking about being put out of business for the people who are here for what panel is it?
The not-for-profits?
The nonprofits, yeah.
Right.
So
soil.
So we're always saying about like how would we put our own selves out of business? So what do we want to do that we want to do before somebody else does it to us? And that's a way of selling it up is if we don't do it, somebody else is going to do it, and that's going to make us irrelevant. So we better do it first to ourselves, or otherwise we're going to be irrelevant. And then obviously you need the business case behind it. You can't really put yourself out of business because you made a bad financial move. But we're always thinking about what are the things when we were One Shack, we did something that was really affecting other businesses around us. So we better be thinking about those now. Even though we're larger, we still need to be thinking that way.
Sure. Dave, what's next? Where do you get ideas for what's next? What's on the horizon?
Well, what's next from a product perspective, or from a like for me, one of the things that I constantly deal with and I have some concerns over in the food service industry is, and it's something that Chef DeSantis there and we've been in education together, and we see how the chefs have changed over the years in kitchens and in the food service industry. And one of the things that I think really has to change, if it isn't changing already, is it has to be the improved quality of life for people who work in the hospitality industry. And I'm not talking about the big chefs who really made it big, like Emeralds and so on, who worked their butts off for 40 years. And but I'm talking about the everyday person who goes into the kitchen, works every night, every holiday, and every weekend. And I think it's unsustainable, and I don't think it's a great quality of life. As a matter of fact, I was in a meeting with 30 leading culinary industry people a few months back, and not one of them in the room was still in the kitchen. And they all aspired to different jobs and a suit and a tie job and so on and so forth. And one of them said, well, I just can't find somebody to run the kitchen anymore. Nobody wants to work lunch and dinner 6 days a week. And I thought, no kidding, they're smarter than we were, right? When we were going through this. And so one of the things I had done in the kitchen, which I just wanted to quickly share, was that I had a very large organization I was running, and we would do 2,000 covers on a busy holiday weekend on a night. and 200 service staff and 100 cooks. And what I did was I set up a rotation system to where every third week the cooks could take off any 2 days they wanted. And what that did was it gave them a quality of life that they could count on to go to a family wedding, to go on a date, to just relax, do whatever they wanted to do. And they were able to swap those days. And the morale over that situation helped tremendously. The quality of life helped. And also, the cooks needed to cross-train each other adequately to cover each other's shift to make this feasible. And so all I would say is that, the food is great, the taking out the ingredients that we don't want is great. All the things we talked about today are great, but those people in the kitchen are the backbone of everything we're doing, and we owe it to them to somehow improve the quality of life in the food service industry. And for me, I'll just leave it at that.
Got it. Great. We'll continue this session of the lightning round. So this is the part where we're going to talk about, real quickly, any predictions you guys have. Dave kind of started us out on that, so about what's next. Any other thoughts from the other three panelists? Before we go to questions, we will save time for questions.
My one prediction around around food services, there needs to be a real big shakeup in distribution. We were talking. There's some conversation before about getting food from farms and remote areas to restaurants that want to buy it. National Young Farmers Coalition was just up here, and we've been talking to them, and we want to find ways to get fresh local products to us, whether it's produce or protein or whatever. And the big problem is the distribution system in between, and it's built for a certain way, and trying to change that is very challenging for small and large chains.
Got it. Maureen?
I would say what's next for us is really, we're an educational institution, and in dining we always sort of think like, how can we contribute to the overall education of our students? And so we're actually really looking at a food literacy program to try to integrate that and to make that connection between personal and planetary health, which the students are very interested in, and we're kind of in the middle. Like we're experimenting with a lot of those things, and we can explain to them how to personalize it, and also that connection to the planetary health, which they're very interested in.
Okay.
So that's
Great.
next for us.
Thank you. Cool. And Dan?
I think there's going to be a reckoning of simplicity. I think that, I would do food tastings for the owner-operators in the OPNAD committee, and there would be 200 owner-operators, and we would be showing them our pipeline, and we'd be showing them, what is going to go into the restaurant is not there yet. And inevitably, I'd have 4 or 5 new sandwiches or whatever. They'd be eating it, and with their mouth full, they'd say, "Chef, what else you got working on?" This isn't even in your restaurant yet. Now you're looking for this insatiable need for new, this insatiable need to be all things to everyone. Yet, Business 101, you can't be all things to everyone, right? So Netflix and all of this variety and all that stuff. I just think that there's going to be a shift. I just don't think, to your point, that having all of these guys working 6 days a week on a 50 menu item versus a 20 menu item.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? I think that the food will be better. Your staff will be better trained. Your food will be more consistent. There's a lot of that going on, but I just think that there's this constant shiny new, give it to me, give it to me, give it to me, that I just think is detrimental.
Got it. Thank you so much. We have about a minute left. Questions?
We work Rocky Rapid up with Kentucky Fried Chicken, Chipotle, and we pick up food prepared but not sold pretty much on a weekly and some places daily basis. Is that something that would appeal to Shake Shack or McDonald's? All we do is the food is frozen and picked up the next day.
It would appeal. We don't have much, if any, leftover food, though, since we're cooked to order. So we're not sitting on extra wasted food at the end of the day.
Well, you have French fries and you have some items that there are items that we do get from Kentucky Fried Chicken that you think you wouldn't get, but once they start freezing, you'd be surprised the amount of food that we do get globally. It's a lot.
Right. So again, I don't work at McDonald's. I can't speak for them, but I can talk to you afterwards and maybe connect you to with some people. the challenge I think would have it is that they're already taxed doing what they're supposed to be doing. I mean, I think somebody did a study of the amount of tasks that we ask these guys to do. They can't do it in a 25-hour day. You know, so there's just so many different things. So if now I'm layering on another thing, as good as they want to do it, and is there going to be something in it for my owner-operator, I would love to do it, but I just don't have the people. Even just getting this from there to there safely and freezing it and wearing the freezer right, if it's a turnkey thing where you can come in and do it, I think people would be open to that. But again, these guys are maxed. Nothing's easy in the restaurant business. Unloading the truck, breaking down the boxes, it's all hard, you know?
My question is maybe mostly for Maureen. I'm wondering how you're thinking about and addressing food insecurity on your campus.
Great question. That's very timely, too. In September, we started a program called Swipe to Care, and I know a lot of institutions around have it. Our students can donate their unused meal swipes each week, and we store a bank. It's all anonymous, and then students that need it can go in and say, I need, through Student Affairs, we have a We Care group, they can go in and say, I need, X number of meals, and then they get the meals, goes automatically on their Husky card is what we have, and so it's completely seamless, and it's been going extremely well. That was a student-driven, that was something we worked with students on, so it was wonderful because they got to take credit for that, and we just helped them implement it. And we'd been thinking about it, but it was anytime it can be a student-driven, we're like, yes, it's student-driven, and we just support it any way we can. So we're thrilled. Thank you for the question.
Great. I think we have a final question.
It's taken a while. Yeah.
Hi, Galen from Green Choice. So you've spoken about responding to the customer's demands, to the good business case. I'm curious, at what point do you feel like it's just your responsibility as food service providers or suppliers to look at the raw science? So if we look at, say Hormel products, right? 177 products, unique products, 55% of them have highly toxic additives. 3 of those most popular toxic additives, of one of them is outlawed in Europe. So I'm wondering when regulation falls short, when your supplies fall short, at what point is it your responsibility, and how do you manage that, recognizing that it is a for-profit business and you have to look out for your bottom line as well?
It's a great question, and now where I work is not in a corporate environment anymore. It's an individual owner, and that was one of the first things we talked about. What can we do just because it's the right thing to do? So like the glyphosate in the flour, I don't think we're going to be able to make more money with that. As a matter of fact, you probably can't even claim on the label that your flour is glyphosate-free because the other ingredients may have glyphosate in it. It's about doing the right thing, and it's about encouraging that segment of the business to do the right thing. Furthermore, it's not only about just, say, the glyphosate in the flour and talking to the company, the mill who produced that. It's about continuously ordering it. And I know the farmers talked to the community, talked before. Well, we got to give them consistency as well, right? Because if you're going to expect a farm to purchase land for 7 years, to have no more chemical additives in it, to be able to do organic and so on, you have to give them a commitment, a long-term commitment, so that they can basically afford to do this, right? Everybody thinks that, oh, organic, you're making more money, or it's actually costing the farmers more money, it's costing the manufacturers more money. The customers aren't really willing to pay quite that 20%. So where I'm seeing it is in the more privately held companies that can say, you know what, this year I don't need that on the bottom line. Whereas with the publicly traded companies, you just need to keep hitting that number a little better each year. So that's been our solution, and that's exactly why we're making some of the changes that we're doing.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everyone. This panel could go on for an awfully long time. It's a great conversation. So thank you to our panel this afternoon.